To all of my peers here, please keep sending in your questions through chat. We have designated spots for your questions where the three of us, Sherwin, Tess, and I, will call out your questions and we will have them answered by the two of them. The deck will also be sent after the whole session as usual. Over to the both of you.
All right. Thank you so much, Purva. That was really nice of you to introduce us such formally. But that is true. I love sweets, um, especially Indian sweets. If folks know about gulab jamun or um, kaju barfi, I can see your face, Purva, like you are totally going in the wrong direction here. So let's come back to the reality, probably. All right. Let me share my screen first. So that is us. I think I was part of C3 batch, and then I graduated and I joined Oracle design team where I met Minhye, who is with us now. She is in Google. And then after that, later I joined Facebook. And even before that, I was working at Monotype, as Pur was mentioning. So that is a company like behind fonts. If you guys have used like Helvetica, Times New Roman, Monotype course, like most of the fonts are like by Monotype. So that was a really good experience. Like even at Facebook, currently I'm working on two different kind of vertical projects. One is where you like build everything from scratch, which we can call as innovation, and then second one is where you are building on top of an existing product. So we'll talk more about that. But before we go there, I'll let Minhye introduce herself.
Hi everyone. It's very nice to meet you all virtually. I am based in Seattle area and currently work for Google Meet, which is a video conferencing team as an interaction designer, and previously worked with Sohaj at Oracle. And I'm very excited to share what I've learned in the industry, and especially thanks Sohaj introduced me for this opportunity, and he's been telling me a lot about how much he enjoyed the classes at CCA. So I'm excited to meet you guys all and share the thoughts, and yeah, looking forward to it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we are so glad to have you here, Minhye. So this class, we usually have like one studio. I wish we were there, all of us together. It's half nostalgic probably, if that's the right word here. Um, yeah, but let's do this. So we have an agenda for you guys. We have a slide deck ready. Isn't that lovely? So very quickly, what we're going to talk about is what are these big companies and how do they like survive and grow, and like how are they really different than other companies. What are the types of projects that you'll get to work on once you are inside these companies, and you'll be very soon after your graduation. And then we'll also go through a design exercise. So please don't sleep, because you're gonna have to like actually do something here. So that's one thing. And also towards the end, we'll talk about one of the by the way, as I said, like I have worked with some startups before. One of the startup is looking for a designer who probably more than one. So we'll talk more about that towards the end. So that's another incentive for you to listen more carefully. All right, before we dive into stuff, and by the way, we want it to be more interactive rather than you guys just listening in. So it'll be really good if you guys can, if not, if you haven't turned on your cameras, that'd be great if you can. And let's just have like a more conversation. How are things going in terms of like, I know that this is a stage, probably you guys are graduating soon, right? um, and you guys might be applying for jobs, probably also looking for applying in big tech companies. And like with all the situation that's going on, in few words, if somebody would like to like jump in and talk a little bit about that.
Or
It's
we can point out anybody. So
yeah. Otherwise, we'll start pointing out.
Go.
Graduating is nice. Oh, sorry, Ian here.
Uh,
Um, Sorry?
You can go first.
Oh.
All right, Gordon.
Besides graduating soon, I think at this moment graduating is nice, but I wonder, like, I would say a good 30% of me wants like someone pull the brakes. We're not, this is not yet, you know, I need more time kind of thing.
Yeah, totally. Um, yeah. So when you say like you need time, you mean like in terms of just taking a step back and probably look at what's happening around us and then probably jump into the jobs piece? Is that what you're referring to?
Kind of. And also there's a thing where like when I signed up for MDes, it's like, oh yeah, it's gonna be 1 year. And coming from undergrad, it's like 1 year will fly really fast, but I didn't really think about it until it becomes slim to me. It's like, wait, I still have so much more I want to learn.
Yeah, that's true. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else?
Yeah, it is actually a little overwhelming because at this stage in our graduation, I feel like I'm getting like a lot of contradictory advice as to how to go about what to do next. Some people are like, keep on it. It feels like a rat race where, you're competing against so many people and then you have to land that perfect job. But really, all I want to do is slow down, figure out what I really want to do after I graduate and figure out what it is I'm really interested in. So yeah, it can be very overwhelming at this stage.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else?
I I can go. One of the questions that I have been asking myself lately while I'm still making my portfolio is, uh, it's a high level question, but what is your first where do you reach with your portfolio at the end of the day? Like, do you reach where you get personal satisfaction, or do you reach where you consider it good enough for, the job you are applying? Because if it's personal satisfaction, I don't think I'm close by any chance.
Such an amazing and awesome question. So thanks for sharing. Yeah, we'll definitely talk about all of these things. Just specifically to answer that one first, you will never reach your personal satisfaction. There is no end to the perfection that you're seeking. So whatever you have is what you should go ahead with. And obviously, we'll talk more about that later. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else?
I can go. Hi, Sohaj and Minhye. Well, it's been stressful, I would say, because it's not just our last semester. So we have lots of projects going on. With that, we have the entire portfolio creation, talking to people, understanding, what would work best for our, for the which project would be the best to be, included. And apart from that, many of us have like freelance projects also going on. So it's like a roller coaster ride. You don't know like how to like juggle it smoothly. So yeah, it's a little stressful from my end.
It's like totally understandable because even us, I mean, even me, working in the industry, it's always been challenging to choose which projects to be on, and then like it's just evolving process. I think you eventually get there, but never. I feel like never ending. You just keep putting efforts.
Yeah, totally agree.
And that's like a best segue to our topic as well. What kind of projects you should be looking at and what you should probably include in your portfolios, in your interviews, and then obviously like also like how do you actually work after you get that job. But before we go there, any other thoughts, questions in mind? Cool. Let's go ahead and talk about how does it look like to work at big tech companies. So the very first thing, let's get that out of the picture, is that you will be working with many different kind of people. It will not be just designers. It will be composed of like so many different type of individuals coming from so many different type of backgrounds. So, but it will be different depending upon company to company, even within obviously big tech companies as well, and also from project to project within one company. You may have some of the folks like data scientists, you may not even have them. And like same goes for every other person that you see here listed. So rather than going too much in depth about this one, I would like to ask like if there are anything that you see here that you don't know about. So we should talk about that very briefly. Anyone who'd like to jump in?
Personally, for me, I'm not really familiar with quality assurance. I think that has to do with some design quality, I suppose, but it doesn't strike my mind right now.
Nice. Yeah, totally. So quality assurance usually, and by the way, Minhye, I think you also have a slide towards like our different type of fooding, right? So that will also tap upon some of this piece. But the quality assurance just reflects like whatever you're building, it is up to the notch that you want to build. So there are different aspects to it. One is definitely design, but there are also types of like there are bugs in your products, like the ones that you're building. So there is a actual separate teams for QA and QE who will ensure that those bugs are resolved. And many times even like designers are involved in that process, but many times the design quality is sometimes even the separate team itself who will ensure that whatever you are pushing it out there, it is also adhering to your design principles.
Wow.
In each company has their own bar to pass those quality. So it depends on what product or which company you're in, but like that's their job. They're actually testing a lot and then figuring out and validating if this is the right quality for their customers to get delivered.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I wasn't even aware of it.
Yeah. And by the way, Minhye will be talking a little bit more about that piece, which would be nice. Any other questions on this one?
I don't know what program manager or TPM role is.
Yeah,
Shall
that's
we also call that one out in chat where she asks between the difference between product manager and program manager?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And that's sometimes confusing as well. And by the way, these two folks, they have a very overlapping role, just to point that out first. So product manager, I think you guys had a workshop as well before. So you guys know a little bit about that. But the overall, if you have to say in one word, they focus on managing the overall product lifecycle, like what to think about what should go in there and how to manage to actually ship it out. So they are into the execution side of it. The program managers are more towards how do you manage different programs within an organization. So for example, if there are 5 different projects running, so how do you ensure who is working on what, and how do you make sure that they are gonna fulfill their goals based on what they have established, their success criteria, etc. And then so that is what the role of a program manager is, not just to look into like one project or a product, but rather as a holistically more towards different type of projects. So their role can also go into like how do you manage the finances of different organizations and etc. So that it's a more broader role, but also from a different angle. And the same goes for the TPMs. TPM is nothing but technical program manager or technical project manager based on what we are talking about. So they are a little bit more into the technical side of it. So they need to have more understanding on what is happening from the engineering perspective, but the role remains almost similar to it.
Thanks. That helps clear it up.
Any other questions before we move forward?
Who's a product analyst?
Yeah. Sometimes this product analyst is called like just analyst, or sometimes it's even called like data analyst. But of course, they have their own differences in it. But product analyst more focuses on collecting the data from the product that you are a part of and making sense out of it, so that you can figure out what to improve further. So for example, they will be looking at how analyzing the behavior of the user while using the product. And then from that, they will be figuring out what are those, let's say, top 10 pain points, and then bringing that back into to the team, if we can put that into the roadmap to actually start working on it. So that in one way, they are also ensuring the quality in from the data angle.
Got it. Thanks.
I have a question. How often do you work with all these people? Is there all hands meetings where everybody's present? You know, you know, do you interact with some of these people daily? How does it work?
Yeah, that's, I think, a very important question. It totally depends, by the way, on project to project. But usually you work, so if I have to say, your best friends are product manager and UX researcher. So you work with them almost like probably daily, to figure out so many things. Other than that, like data science and content strategy is also like you work with them on a very regular basis. Um, Usually what happens is, like in Facebook I can talk about, is like we have like a weekly sync ups. You can call them like cross-functional sync ups or like cross-functional team meetings, where you will share different things from whatever people are working on. So that's one piece. Another are like more like a on a working basis. So you can have like different workshops or working sessions to work with these folks, um, whatever you guys are like in that stage of the product. And obviously it will depend upon what kind of product it is, which we will be talking about next.
Awesome, thanks.
Okay, so if there are more questions, we'll take them towards the end. And Purva and like our awesome team will help us to collect those questions. Super quickly, not diving too much detail into this, how are they different than other smaller companies? Other smaller companies, of course, um, from a very obvious perspective, is that they have less user base. And so they will be like, so in large companies, we'll be more focused towards like, how does the metric look like, and how to ensure that they don't go down. So for example, if you have like 2 billion Facebook users, if like even like 0.1% is going down because of the change that you're making, that's a huge uh, thing, right? So that's not how it works in like mostly like small tech companies. But I wouldn't say like it's like that 1-0 kind of thing. It's like it totally depends upon company to company as well. um, and Minhye, if you want to add anything else into that, please feel free.
Yeah, I mean, especially metrics, it really matter in large companies, and just because that's how people can validate their success, to be honest. And in small companies, like everybody might know what each other's working, and but in large tech, you might spend like months is just changing few button styles, which sounds like frustrating, but it is actually not that, you know, small effort, because so many teams are connected and it needs to be agreed by many different stakeholders and make sure it doesn't break anything. So yeah, it has really just different processes, and then different, I think, direction and perspective going on between large and small companies.
Yeah. And also like the teams would be different. The list that you saw before will not be the list that you'll see in these companies. You'll be doing probably like content part as well by yourself, but in like larger companies you won't be. So there will be a content person who will be like ensuring what the copy should go in your designs. So similarly, all these other roles will also be more overlapping in small companies. Okay. Before I show that, so how do these big companies remain big? Why don't they come down and become smaller, or like they just don't go away? What is the like a what is that thing that is making them survive and keep growing? Um, there is one formula to that, and most of the companies now have realized that and have been following it, which is this. Obviously, there are different types of these, but the core idea remains the same. This, by the way, do you guys know what this is before I jump in? If somebody knows, please, you can just talk about it in a minute. All right. So this is called Three Horizon Framework, which Now it's nothing but like looking at how the business should be investing in different type of projects. So for example, core here, which means is like you already have some products established. How do you ensure that you optimize them and make them better? So, and the second one is adjacent. Let's say there is already a market out there, but that company is not in that market yet. So how do we grow into that new market? For example, if Amazon is into e-commerce and they want to go into, let's say, transportation, right? Or into cars. So, and assumingly that they're not there, but of course they are there now as well. Then they will be, so that if they build a product around that, that will be an innovation project, and goes into the adjacent market. And then the transformational is where like there is not even a market that exists and the company is definitely not there yet. So for example, let's say we talk about flying cars, or I don't know, and even like giving an example of iPhone. So there was no market for a thing like iPhone before the iPhone came, right? So they created a new market, and then the company went into that and eventually grew into something called now Apple. So we are not going to talk about transformational today, only because most of the jobs are not there. They are in the increment, in the core and in adjacent phases. So we'll, just to simplify it, talk about core as incremental, which means that there are existing products and you are building on top of it or improving them. And then the adjacent is nothing but innovation, where if the company is into one business model and moving into a new one, how do you build those products? Or if you are completely redefining the existing product from scratch, how does that look like? Okay, so let's just jump into the first one, which is innovation. I'll be pacing it up a little to ensure that like we cover up all the stuff that we want to. But feel free to ask all the questions in the chat and we'll talk about that later. It is also called 0 to 1 projects. That's like a very common word that's used. It's like you're building from 0 to like 1. 1 is like 1% of the rollout. We don't need to dive too much detail into that. But the objective is like you're building everything from scratch. So you need to ensure that you're bringing in the customer. So that's a completely different perspective than there's an established product. How does the process looks like? It's, just to simplify it, dividing into 4 stages. First one is, which we all know, discovery. So just figuring out first what the problem even is. Some like when companies want to do something like this, they don't even know what the problem is. So that is where like we jump in and try to figure out from user interviews, from diary studies. So that's what we do at Facebook as well. So like all of these kind of things where we can figure out what the problem even is, and then defining the target audience, what are the jobs, which is another way is like, it's a different perspective of user stories. And then like, how does the user journey would look like? And then second piece is product market fit. Probably you guys also talked about this in the previous workshop. This is where you will, whatever you are designing or developing, how does the market take that? Like, do they accept it? How much they accept it? What part they accept or not? So that is what you figure out here. So in innovation projects, usually like even business objective isn't clear. So you define that here. So you also define what the success criteria would look like. How do you say that you are successful? And in the success criteria, like it will be different than incremental. So for example, you will be receiving, let's say, 10x in the last 2 months new users, but in incremental, of course, it will be like, let's say 5% increase, right? Rather than 200% increase. So you should not be focusing too much around like that this is a huge jump, but because there's a lot of fluctuation in innovation projects with respect to like incremental. So these are the things that you'll have to keep in mind when you have to figure out what the success criteria should look like. Similarly for prioritization as well, like you have to prioritize, you have so many ideas. This is more creative project like innovation. So you have so many ideas. How do you drill down what we should be building in the next half? And then you design and build and you launch, you test, and you keep iterating on that, which will be less iterations on the innovation perspective. And your output of the second phase could also be to not launch it. Like if the market says that you don't want it, then that's also a success. So we should not be like discouraging you. Otherwise, rather you are keep building something. Ultimately, you realize after investing so much that this is not what people want. So third phase, optimize. So you have established that yes, seems like this first 1,000 people that we tested it on, they might want it, right? So that is what you did in the product market fit. But now it is time to grow to the larger audience, target audience that you defined. So how does the product will change? How do you grow that product to ensure that it is acceptable by this larger target audience? And also you have to figure out how does this product integrate into other company products. So for example, if Facebook is building something new, they'll have to eventually figure out how does this tie back into the existing products. Otherwise, like you can also have like a new product that is affecting like negatively on some other existing products. So you don't want to do that. How do you grow the whole pie rather than just growing your own pie? Here you also figure out the quality of it. Like you don't think about quality in the first 1,000 testing when you test it on first 1,000 users. Here you'll figure out like, okay, what should be our design principles? Because you don't even have design principles for these kind of projects yet. So you define them. You start using the design systems. So this is where like quality becomes a really major part. And then you grow. So once you have, let's say, established and you have figured out you have successful, now it is time to grow into a larger audience than you defined before. You also redefine your success criteria. It's almost like first phase back again, but it's not first phase because you are now looking into a totally different way of things. It is almost now it's an established product. So it goes into more on an incremental project side than innovation. I have highlighted some of these parts which designer mostly focuses on. As you can see, the discovery phase is where like designer is from the very start involved. So that is how in majority of the big tech companies it is. Very quickly, so in Facebook we have, oops, let's just talk about it first. Do you guys know what success metric is? And if somebody knows, like, can you just very briefly talk about it?
I think I just put in a question in the chat regarding that because we have been discussing this term for the last 2 semesters, and there's no right answer because I think the professors have a way of defining it through different explanations. But for our project, for my team project especially, I think a success metric is something which is going to let us know later that our product reached the right audience, the target audience that we had in mind, and it created the impact that we wanted to create in the first place. So I think that's how we look at it, but wanted to know how it works.
Yeah, I think you are definitely going in that direction. So as the success metrics, the word success criteria is reflecting like it is the kind of the metrics that you will choose or an objective that you will choose that will define how the success would look like for your product. So for example, if Amazon is, I think we are running out of time. So super quickly, like if Amazon is building they are producing a lot of like boxes, like they're boxing it in a lot of the products. So what will be their success criteria? So their success criteria would be like increasing the number of the production of those. So that is how you will measure like, oh yeah, so if you are increasing that production in this month to these many X times, so then you are becoming successful. But the downside of that is, for example, those boxes could be like damaged, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you ensure that, and like based on the success criteria, it seems like you're successful, but you are actually not. So that is where the counter metrics come in, and you have to define how do you counter your success criteria. So in that case, if you're looking into the increase in production, you should also be tracking the quality of what you're producing. Are those boxes damaged or not? So let's just move forward. into Incremental, where I'll hand it over to Minhye to talk about it.
Cool. So when you think about the incremental projects, you can easily think it as an like maybe easier problem or a smaller problem to solve, because it seems like most likely adding small features on top of the existing product. It is actually easy when you just see it as a design perspective, but what you'll face as a challenge will be like not easy, definitely, because there are so many stakeholders involved, and they will keep questioning it, why we need this effort. And you'll see resources are always limited, and each quarters, like leadership define the large organization direction and goals, and we all need to agree on it and work for the same goals as in one company or organization. Um, that's why we need to start a project with very clear goal and objective and the problems with the business opportunity, because everybody will ask why we need this. So if you go to the next slide, these are processes. It seems not too different as innovation project cycle, but I can say it is usually much shorter time frame. And sometimes you go through all of this within a month, depends on how urgent project it is. And we sometimes skip some of the things on this list. Sometimes there is no design, no prototyping, no test stages, but designers still will get involved. On define and align stages, PM is heavily involved and make sure everyone working on this project and like whoever approved this effort, such as leadership, we all agree with this problem, goals, and requirements. And we also set the metrics, success metrics that Soha just mentioned, to be more specific, like breaking into the details like numbers or percentages. The other important thing that I wanted to highlight is when we build and ship something, we always double check with our compliance and privacy team to make sure we all meet the legal policies and things we're building like does not harm anybody. It's been like hot topics in Silicon Valley, like about the ethical design, like privacy and all this stuff. And each company owns that, and each company has their own policies and rules. So it is one of the really important process. The other important thing on when you see the build and roll out, it's all about the design and build and design and build, iterate and develop. And then you go to rollout plan, and then you do the launch, and after the launching, there's still like you still get a lot of feedback from the customers, and then there's so many iterations going on and happening like after this launching. So yeah, if you go to the next slide. This is just a typical example that you guys always, like every day we all visit Amazon.com, and there's, you know, it seems like just one single page, but like there's so many features on this, such a single web page, which means a lot of different stakeholders, like thousands of employees. There's so many decisions made and experimentations, and it's like testings are happening a lot, and even now. So I thought this is just like a good example to show, because it's a one website, but there's so many stuff top of this single screen. If you go to next, this is just a Google Meet example that I'm working on my team. The first one you see is feature of background blur. So like during the COVID, the user traffic grew up, and then I think we now got more than like 20, 30 times users comparing before the COVID. And obviously Google Meet was a little behind than our competitor. It seems like there's not that much UI changes involved, like not that much design effort required. But I think this is a typical example how we work with a team to add a new feature. like out of many feature requests, we figure out business need from customer feedback that background blur was the one of the feature that customer has been requested a lot due to some privacy concerns. And then because you're working from home, there's so many like crazy backgrounds going on. Somebody passed through, and people are there are so many requests. So, and we spent time to plan for it. At this point, what designer provided as a mock was probably just different type of entry points where you can like click to start background blur effects. But like whole the process was like we tested UI, we tested quality, we tested and iterate, and then the whole process actually took like a month, like 3 months, I think. And like similar as like what you're seeing on the right side, this is the feature that we recently launched. You can now cast your meeting on your TV screen. Again, we already had like material guides, so there are not that many like design efforts like innovation project, but still like there's so many stuff. Like we had to really sync with Google Chrome team, we had to sync with like device TV, like Nets team and the Chrome based team, and there's so many stakeholders involved. So shipping this one single feature really require a lot of effort. Yeah, if you go to the next slide. And I was just gonna like talk about this like test and iterate process. So you see this like little 3 icons here. Maybe this is just the internal Google thing, but like the first thing you see a little fish. This is actually, we call it a fish food. This is stage that only internal Google employees allowed to test and then send the feedback. And then if you see the middle one, we call it as dog food. I'm sure Facebook uses the same language. Like dog food is very commonly used. This is what the stage that it actually being tested like hybrid, like some internal Google employees and then some of the external testers also like share the feedback about this new product changes. And then after this fish food, dog food stage, lastly, we do a lot of like bug bashing and the bug like fixes. This is how that we make sure our quality of product meet the bar. Google is always trying to meet the higher bar as possible. So this is just a typical process like you'll see like during the testing and iterating stage.
Looks like we don't like fish that much, but we have everything else. But this is very important piece, I think, that you are making a lot of decisions after you build stuff as well, and you are iterating upon that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, shall I take this one?
Yeah, sure.
So very quickly, what are the differences? You guys have seen so many things, but it might be confusing. So let's just focus on how the differences look like. Innovation. So less constraints, far more creative. You can play around a lot. But as Minhye was mentioning, in incremental, you have so many constraints. You probably would just be making like a background blur, right? But you are making so many decisions with so many different people. Second is on the innovation side, you are focusing on validating the idea. You don't even know if it's going to work. But on the incremental side, the idea and everything has already been established. What you're doing is you are adding that feature and you are shipping that in very time constrained manner and working with many different people. Third is you're in innovation side, you don't even know the problem many times. So you are discovering that problem. In the incremental, sometimes, well, most of the times you're having marketing manager who is collecting the data, which is what we call as inbound, or like a UX researcher or like a PM, based on what problems have been faced initially. So that discovery has already happened. So what you are doing is you are defining the people and the business problem to work on the designs. Fourth, on innovation side, the testing and iteration is a very different aspect of it. Like when you are iterating, you are making huge changes, even in every single iteration. On the other hand, in incremental, you are focusing more on not letting the metrics drop. So It could even be the iteration is like just change of the button itself, like rather than having a button or without having one. So it could even be that small. Fifth, you are on innovation side, you don't even have design principles many times. So you are defining those things. In incremental, you already have those principles established. You are working with those design principles within those constraints. Similarly, for innovation, you are bringing the consistency later because first you have to validate the idea first. But on the other hand, in incremental, you already have a design system established. It could be material design in like Google case, and you are just working with those things, with those constraints. Um, and the last one is, of course, in both the cases, you are working with various different people and you are dealing with conflicts. So, and conflicts, they are probably the best part of the whole thing, because that is how you will grow and make the product better. If you don't have the conflicts and you're just agreeing with everything, like that's not going to improve the product. So having the healthy conflicts is a very on a regular basis that thing happens in both of these type of projects. So why are we talking about all of this? Because you should be thinking about in your portfolios what kind of projects you should be putting in. So if most of the jobs are in incremental projects, then probably you should add incremental project in your portfolio and talk about in your interviews as well. So we're gonna like dive a little bit more into like that pieces, those pieces like through our design exercise. So we'll jump into that. Um, quickly going through what we are going to do in this. One is we're going to break it down into two groups now. One is team will be focusing on building an incremental product, and then other team will be building an innovation product. But the problem remains the same. That's the interesting part. So the problem is that deciding what to wear is a huge challenge for people. That's given to you, and now we're going to work within the constraints of that. The who is building, who is solving that problem? It's Instagram. What you have to do is you have to define what the target audience should be, what the success criteria would look like, and how would you prioritize the features and the ideas that you come up with. So I'll be taking on the innovation side, and Minhye will be handling the incremental. And eventually, once we'll like go through those exercise, we will come back together as a larger team and share those ideas.
So close, Sohaj. So close.
Yes. That was awesome.
Almost. That was really good, though. A marathon last minute.
Yeah. How did others do? Other group?
That's great. We didn't have enough time, but I think it was pretty close.
Same. Okay. Nice. So for this time, what we will do is quickly, like in a minute, we need one volunteer who can share the thoughts, what you guys discussed in each group. Anyone who'd like to jump in?
And your team start first?
Yeah, let's start with my team, which is the awesome team. Go ahead, guys. I know we can do it.
You guys gonna make me do this?
No, not Tess. No, not you.
not you. Yeah.
You have already been doing.
Can someone tag team with me? Can I just call on someone to tag team with me? Deb.
Okay. Yeah, totally. You guys can tag team.
That was awesome. Basically, we covered. So in the whole innovation process, our problem was to take Instagram and we all had the same problem. So define the target audience and then figure out what the success metric would be. So success criteria, and we somehow zeroed in on young millennials who are independent, living independently, earning decently, interested and looking for fashion. So and then that kind of led to actions that they make through Instagram. And some of the cool ideas that came up were using filters to create like a fitting room and to see what different sellers are actually creating, see how it looks on you, have a one-click option to buy integrated with like PayPal or something so you can pay. And some should haves were we could potentially through stories swipe up and browse the marketplace, see what similar sellers have, what options they have, and yeah. And Deb, can you add to that?
So you've covered almost everything. One thing like as a takeaway, I would like to say that initially our group, we were looking for target audience. We were only looking at our customer. But then one takeaway was that, you should look holistically, look at the 360 view, focus not only just the customers, but also the buyers, because they are our target audience as well. And yeah, one thing we started discussing, but I would like to ask Sohaj and Minhye, is that when you're looking at success metrics also, are you only for this particular exercise, we focused only on the customer's success metrics? Is there anything related, connected to the buyers or even the brand who's like, for example, Instagram's, from a brand perspective, what are the success metrics that we can look into? So yeah, just a question.
So totally. By the way, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it was a really good exercise what you guys did come up with in such a short time. To answer that question, yes, like we should have buyer, because so in my exercise we were doing like a e-commerce Instagram going into e-commerce. So we need like perspective of a buyer as well as a seller. So for both of them to succeed, we need to have success criteria for both of them. And even in that, like sometimes one metric is, most of the times one metric is not enough. So that is why you need a counter metric. Like how will you not dig another hole while you are filling up another one? So which is what we came up with as well, which was like number of transactions is one, but how much revenue are you generating? Are those like small $1 transactions? So you need also like to think about how does a full revenue generated by the company looks like. And the same goes for what you are talking about is like the seller side. So how many transactions are they doing? At the same time, how much are they making from it? So definitely both the perspectives.
Yeah, and then one more thing, in the real company, like Amazon, for example, there are like huge seller team separately. So like even though we are seeing like one product, there's only the focusing on the customer side, and then there is like huge seller side product team only focusing on the seller experience. So and the same as a Facebook, you guys have a big advertisement like who is actually selling ads, and then we are the one who is watching the ad. So I think it's totally separate efforts. Yeah.
Yes.
I have a if anyone has a question, can go ahead. Okay. What I was wondering is that how does the policy work from Instagram's point of view? I don't know much about it, but do they get a percentage on everything that is sold through Instagram from the seller, or it's a fixed cost? Because I think Amazon is where you get a percentage for everything sold. So
exactly, that is the question that I was actually expecting as well. Like, how do actually Instagram is making money out of it? It's actually the merchants, the sellers who are making. So there are various different business models for e-commerce. Amazon also have like I think 5 different types. Like one of them is what you're saying, like having a percentage cut out of a certain transaction, or it could also be like in a bulk transaction, how much of the cut looks like. But we were not focused too much around that, because like there is a whole completely like a business strategy teams and like so many people doing that. But the idea is definitely that's true. We'll have to figure out what the business model would look like. Is it just that probably you are just providing a platform for both of them to engage, and you another model would be just keep focusing on advertisement of shops, like having like a those content to be popping up through the ads. So that's another way of looking at it, rather than having a actual cut from the transaction. Hopefully that answers. All right. For second team, let's have a volunteer.
We have a lead. Volunteer to lead.
God, why? Um, okay, so I'm gonna refer to the document. Um, so we had the same, problem statement, and we defined our target audience as like from 16 to ages of 16 to 29. These could be either young professionals, millennials, influencers, or high school kids who are pressuring their parents into buying them stuff. Uh, I think their activity might be from moderate to daily use, and behavior. The behavior that we were kind of looking at was they engage in follow fashion influencers, and every once in a while swipe up on stories that have brand ads in them, and they get to external websites from their feed or their story or the search, like the ads that are shown in search about fashion. How would we measure success? Out of We assume that the in-app browser that Instagram gives us can track whether a add to cart or a checkout has been happened through an external fashion website, and if that does happen, that counts as success for us as compared to all the users who went to that website. um, so that's something that we are looking at. Increase in fashion content, obviously, ads, and increased engagement with those ads. um, I think one of the ideas that we had was that people search fashion based off of either brands, or like just random stumble upon stuff, like something came up in your feed and like, oh, this is interesting, and then I opened it up and I saw it was too pricey, so I'm not buying it. Stuff like that. I think it would be a good idea to, like, for example, if I see a bomber jacket if on my feed and I want to look at other bomber jackets based off of what happened in my feed, so there might be a way of filtering out fashion based off of what the apparel looks like instead of what brand it is. So there might be some image recognition used in this. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the ideas that we have, and we unfortunately ran out of time. But yeah, that's pretty much it. But this was a lot of fun. I think working out with so many constraints, and people kind of giving out ideas, random ideas, and having the viability to understand how it would be beneficial from Instagram's perspectives and sellers' perspectives and buyers' perspectives, and what do we want users to do without misaligning what Instagram is and what it stands for. We do not want to turn it into another e-commerce website. Oh, you should have filters, and what kind of jeans do you want, and still showing content, but like inclining a bit towards fashion for the problem statement. So that's, yeah, it was fun.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing both the themes. I love doing this, frankly. Like, from my perspective as well, like, it's not just that we are sort of posting this workshop, but we are learning as well from you guys. So we are already out of time, but I just wanted to see if you guys have another extra 5 minutes for our Q&A. Cool. I see.
Or you guys can always send us email, like follow-up emails. Yeah, our email is in this deck, and we're gonna share this deck after.
Yeah.
I had a question. What does an innovation project look like from a timeline perspective, from discover to the optimized stage?
Totally depends. Like how big or how small that innovation, because even in innovation there are so many different ranges to it. So like in Facebook, the one that I'm working on in innovation project, like it's a huge project, so it's gonna take like around 3 years to build that. But obviously it's not about the total time that it'll take. It's about those different chunks of times and what will happen through those. Because there might be a case even after, let's say, 6 months or so, you may end up not pursuing it, or you may end up creating two different projects out of it. So there are two different streams and we both are successful. Now, two new teams have been made out of that. So then the whole timeline and everything else seems very different. But in general, like when we talk about innovation projects, they come under like a strategy work streams. Like it's more holistic and it's more future oriented. So the timeline is around 3 years or more than that, 3 to 5 years.
Okay, awesome.
I,
Another question, if nobody else
yeah.
has a question. Oh, yeah, question.
I just had a takeaway from this exercise that I think it reinforces the fact about cross-functional teams because you know I had so many questions doing this which were like related to answers that would have been given to me by the business team or something else, right? So in this particular exercise we just went through doing this like hypothetically, and we assumed a lot of things, but in a real timeline it would be you would be supported with other teams. So yeah,
That's like one of the most important things. Like the stuff that we did, it's not, you are not doing that by yourself, it's led by PM, many of these things. So how do you, so a lot of the content, like even the target audience and everything, you'll be getting those information from your data science person, from your analyst, and from your PM. So that is a great point, that it will be a very collaborative environment, so you'll be getting help.
I put in a question in the chat, which was around the target audience. And in this exercise where we were deciding the target audience, the information was really just based out of our whims and fancies. We were like, oh, maybe this person is going to buy it, or like maybe that person is going to buy it. And this was really just the starting of the project that we were like deciding as a team. So, but what strategy do you use at workplace to decide the target audience? Is it based out of the data that you've received from a certain team, or like is it really just something that the team comes up with?
Do you want to answer that, Minhye?
I think it depends on the for the incremental projects, most of the time we already have the user set. For example, like Gmail, there are some two different targets, like enterprise users or the consumer users, just like us. And then within there, we can narrowing down, but we already have those type of user profile. But like in terms of the innovation projects, Sohaj, you can speak up, but like it's most likely company invests for reaching out to the new opportunities and the new customer groups. So it really depends on, sometimes we start with the research, like market research first to figure out and validate, is this like the whole effort and investment that we are taking time and the resource, is this like valuable? And that we actually run the market research before we even start like deep diving into the project.
So market research is a different team, or the designers are the market researchers also?
Usually a different team. Yeah.
It's a even bigger than probably design team. Like so this is what I was we had in the slides, like product marketing manager is working on, like they're called different things, but in Facebook that's what they're called, PMM. So they will be focusing on defining those target audiences and like doing the market research and consolidating what is it that we should be focusing on.
Okay, thank you.
And a quick same thing about the target users. If there's like different user groups, how do you prioritize like features for the users? Is it based on like the highest number of users or the most revenue, or?
That's a really good point. I think it's sometimes the reality is sometimes we focus on the user who pays the most, has the largest usage, like the first tier one, top tier customers. We focus on their feature request first, especially if that product is for like enterprise or something. But I think for consumers, definitely larger group. We focus on the majority of usage that we are getting.
Yeah, because the majority could turn into like income generating.
Yeah. And also, so for example, in innovation projects, there are some of the different categories that you define, for example, like a super user. So these are the kind of the users who will be like defining it for other users. So they are like your sort of, they'll push your product out. So you have to like figure out these different techniques, and obviously with the team, you are not owning that piece. But like how would that audience look like, who's going to expand it to probably a larger audience. So that's another way of looking at that. All right, we are way out of our time, but I just loved what we did here. There was so much to talk about, and I know that there might be more questions for you guys. So let me quickly share my screen so that you guys have our email to reach out to. Hopefully you guys see my screen here. So that's Sohaj Barar at fb.com and Minhye Kim at google.com. As I said, towards the end, we have one of the, I worked with one of the startups while I was working, while I was like in CCA. So that is a startup that's called Helpful. So they are focused towards building a community for seniors and like how can we give and get help for them and with them. So it's an amazing startup. It's a very early stage startup. So they are looking for a volunteer who can help them out, especially in the design. And if you guys might be interested in learning more about that, so what I did was I actually worked with them. So that was one of my projects, CCA projects, and which I presented at Facebook as well as at Oracle, and that helped me even got a job. So just saying. So if you guys might be interested in learning more, I can stay on this call for next 5 minutes, and we can talk about it. And everyone else who won't be interested, we can say goodbye.
Thank you, guys. Thank you to both of you also for doing this. This has been absolutely great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Purva, Tess.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.